In the process of preparation for this meeting, I read a lot about this Bosnian case.
Mm-hmm.
It was unbelievable how the people who should actually to ensure the peace and safety were involved in such terrible things like human trafficking, like forced prostitution. So my first question is, what is the origin of such processes?
It was the most incredible violation of human rights in one place, in a post-conflict, by peacekeepers that I think that has ever taken place. Trafficking, as in many of war-related economies, is all about financial gain. It's all about the extremism of capitalism, if you like. You have a poor market, you have a market in terms of you have, in Bosnia, some 80,000 male peacekeepers who are there without families. And you have a supply. I mean, talking about people as the ability to supply people in Moldova, Ukraine, Bulgaria to a certain extent, Romania, countries that had become impoverished and that women were willing to migrate to try to earn money. And they weren't told that they were going to be forced into prostitution. They were told they were going to Germany or Greece to work in hotels. And in fact, I have to say that I hadn't met anyone from Ukraine until I went to Bosnia, and then I met hundreds of women from Ukraine who had been brought from Ukraine into Bosnia for the specific purpose of sexual exploitation. How did it happen? Because there was nothing to stop it. Police were not getting paid, so many of them would take a small amount of money just to avert their eyes so it didn't happen.
Are the guilty persons punished now? Are they sentenced?
The worst perpetrators were actually found guilty and sentenced to jail sentences. That said, many of the men who were successfully prosecuted are now out and free because they've served their sentences and they're back in Bosnia. Some of them are allowed to run to become mayors, to become politicians, to go back into the system. And what sort of message does that send? Many men, the vast majority of those who perpetrated the crimes, were not prosecuted. And we can't blame the International Tribunal for that, because the International Tribunal wanted to focus on the commanders, on the ones who organised the crimes against humanity and the war crimes, the genocide in one case. The ones who organised it and the ones who gave the orders then to implement it. So they weren't really going after every single guy. That was supposed to be done in the Bosnian courts. And the cases are still going. But the vast majority have not been prosecuted. So unfortunately, has there been real justice? No, there has not. Some have been punished. And I think that if we look at the positive, because of the incredible bravery and courage of the women from Bosnia, we now have an international law which recognises what rape really is in the context of conflict. It's changed the way in which we prosecute, if not think about rape. It's been prosecuted as a crime against humanity, as persecution, as torture, very, very important, and in certain circumstances as an element of genocide.
What about the peacekeeping forces actually? Has something changed inside this structure?
We don't know of any single peacekeeping mission where there are no incidents of sexual exploitation. The biggest one most recently has been in Burundi and in Central African Republic, where it was the constant exploitation of children by peacekeepers. What has happened? Nothing. And this is the biggest scandal that I think exists within the United Nations, and they have got to do something about it.
There is sexual violence committed by Ukrainian army and by separatists, and also we know about the phenomenon of prostitution for food.
What has to happen is that the government of Ukraine and those who are running the so-called independent province need to take responsibility for making sure that their troops do not commit these sorts of crimes, do not force women to pay with sex for money or for milk or for food in order to survive, because those are criminal offences, serious criminal offences, which must be prosecuted. So there's several things that the government must do. It must insist on the training of the troops so that they know that if they commit an act like this, there will be prosecution and imprisonment if found guilty. The commanders must be informed that they are the ones who are responsible. And this is a principle which is fundamental in preventing sexual violence.
How to detect these women?
The ways in which it worked in various different conflicts, and I will cite Bosnia as one, where there was a very good system of support. And that was to have NGOs who were providing medical assistance. And you would find that women will access medical assistance because it is often needed. And then by accessing that medical assistance, they can have the opportunity to talk about what happened to them. They don't have to, but if they want to, they can, and there'll be a counsellor available. The best has a lawyer available as well. So if you want to talk to a lawyer, just to say, well, I want to give a statement, I'm not sure I want to prosecute, but I want to identify who it was. Or I want it recorded so that I can at some point maybe take part in a reparations program. But you do it in such a way that there's the person who has survived the attack has agency, and it is confidential. It's also very, very important, whether it be in conflict or non-conflict, that you have a responsive police to allegations of sexual violation. Going into a police station and being immediately interrogated as to where you were, you wanted to sleep with him because you wanted to have payment, weren't you? What you want is to have a safe space where you can talk, preferably to someone of the same gender, who understands and will take you seriously, who will take a statement from you and give you the sort of support that's needed in order to go forward. We're a long way from that in Ukraine, but that is what the police reform is for, that is what the training has to be about. And I think really, really importantly, the way that rape has always been approached is that it's always a woman's fault. It's never the guy. And I think what will happen now with this increase in the knowledge of sexual assaults on men, sexual violations of men, it will show that the comments we were making about women were ridiculous. They've always been ridiculous. No one is going to say about the guy, well, what were you wearing when that guy raped you? No one is going to say, well, you were out drunk, weren't you? So what we're doing is we're actually showing it was always about power. It was always about the exploitation and assertion of your power over an individual.
Someday the conflict in the east of Ukraine will end, and we will need to find some points to understand each other. On your opinion, what is the role of women actually in this peacekeeping process?
I've been coming here since 2014 and met women from the east as well as from the west, and I would say from the very beginning there was not hostility. It was that conversation we were having before about, you know, we want to maintain our values, our culture, our values, our understanding of Russian, and everyone has a Russian grandmother, but we also want to have the greater liberty that we think that Western values offers. But how do we maintain that balance together? And then the conflict got worse, and then there was a polarization. And I saw it happen, how it was very difficult for women to keep that conversation, to keep that narrative going. And it wasn't just women, it was men as well. But then men got conscripted into the military, it becomes more difficult to be anything other than nationalist. If you have a different opinion, then you are seen as someone who is against the government. And so that division has become deepened. That said, I think the women are still trying very hard to hold it together, to try and say that even those who went nationalist for a while are now saying no. Because this conflict, unless there is a dialogue, it's going to go on. That you can have a war in a country and it's not making everybody concentrate solely and only on stopping that conflict. I find that the economic reform programme is being done without any real attention to how the reform programme must be implemented in the East, without any consideration of what needs to be done to make sure that there is budgetary allocation for the ending of the conflict. How are the IDPs going to be adequately returned and housed? What about the particular types of healthcare that's going to be needed and supported? How are you going to set up a justice system which is going to make sure that the social and economic rights of those people are adjudicated? It means money being paid out in order to create a unified and entire Ukraine where human rights are respected, and it's not being done. If you don't do it now, it'll be like Bosnia. It's going to be there forever. as something which is always going to destroy any possibility of sustainable peace. And what I think is happening amongst the women's organisations and individual women that we've met with today, for example, they see this and they want a part of the peace process. They want to be included in and have their voices, their narratives, what's really happening on the ground to real people, not just discussions of battles and who won what battles. What we need to know is how are the children surviving this? Where are they going to get their education? How are the pensioners going to access sufficient money in order to be able to feed themselves? These are the burning questions. How are we going to fix that? We should learn from other people's histories as well as our own. And the approach that was taken in Bosnia is the approach that's being taken here, and it didn't work. Bosnia, for all the money that's been pumped into it and the attempts to try and reform it, is a failed state. That cannot be the fate of Ukraine. It's possible to stop it, and I think women are crucial in carrying that message forward.